Before colonization, India was a diverse civilization with a unique system of ruling. Most of it had been previously conquered by the Mughals, who were a group of Persian and Mongolian Muslims that dominated most of southern Asia. The Mughals controlled the northern parts of India, while the southern part of India was ruled by various regional kingdoms.
During the reign of the Mughals, India had a Hindu majority with Sikh, Jain, Buddhist, and Islam minorities. The Islam minorities were mostly from the Mughal Empire's era, which is when many Hindus were converted to Islam. Islam hence became the second most followed religion. Many Hindu temples were destroyed, like the Marthan Sun Temple in Anantnag, Kashmir, the Madara Sun Temple in Madara, Gujarat, and the Ram Janmabhoomi in Ayodhya, Uttar Pradesh. Some of them were replaced by mosques by the Mughals. Fun fact, the Ram Janmabhoomi is being rebuilt at this moment in the exact same place it originally was. Anyways, the Mughals were destroying many traces of Hindu temples, scriptures, and may have attempted to destroy the religion as a whole. India was following the caste system before colonization. Under the caste system, India was divided into 4 different classes. The first caste was the Brahmins. And another fun fact, I am a Brahmin. They were the priests and teachers. The Kshatriyas were second. They were the warriors and rulers. The third was the Vaishyas. They were merchants and traders. The fourth was the Sudras. They were the workers. The fifth and lowest caste was the Dalits, also known as the Untouchables, who did menial and dirty tasks. Funny enough, as per the Vedas, there are no untouchables, and this system is not even supposed to be hierarchical, but rather job occupational, with all people, regardless of the caste, being equal. Somehow though, it had become a hierarchical system along with the introduction of the untouchables at around the same time that Buddhism was introduced, though the two events are not necessarily connected. The caste system was strictly followed by Indians. It dictated marriages and other social norms, and it wasn't abandoned until British rule.
The Mughals used the Mansabdar system to generate land revenue. The emperor would give revenue rights to the Mansabdar in exchange of soldiers. The Mansab was both revocable and non-hereditary, so the emperor had control over the Mansabdars. The Mughals initially had a strong system of banking and credit, and they issued paper money. However, the Mughals also bled the nation of its wealth by lavishly spending on their palaces and lifestyle. They ignored development and technology, and India fell behind the rest of the world. Education was also majorly improved under Akbar the Great, the third of the greater Mughal emperors, although this would be later broken down by the final one. Akbar created a system of education that was incredibly inclusive and catered to the students' needs and beliefs. He also adopted Persian as the court language, which caused both Hindus and Muslims to study Persian. Women were also given education, and education itself was returned to a more traditional form without excluding the newer information. The education was of Hindu origin, but with the free and equal influence of Muslim education. Akbar also ordered the translating of many Hindu, Greek, and Arabic works into Persian. This kind of patronage continued up until the last of the greater Mughal empires. Urdu later developed as a common medium of expression between Hindus and Muslims. Tragically, a disconnection with the outside world caused stagnation in education, turning it from a learning experience into a monotonous routine.
While Europeans had known about India for a while, the first country to arrive in India was Portugal, after Vasco da Gama discovered a new route to India by going under Africa and realizing that he wouldn't fall off the face of the earth if he did so. Portugal didn't really try to colonize India, but they did set up a huge trading network with many trading ports and joint stock companies, like the Dutch East India Company of 1602. But don't worry, the Mughals were able to stop them from further intruding into India. Portugal came back from their Indian escapades with a ton of spices and cash, which intrigued other nations to come seek out India, namely the French and the British. The French and the British went over to India too, and started their own respective trading companies there. Now, the vastly superior European countries had taken over the Mughal Empire's land, and controlled the Indian Ocean as well, as the Mughals didn't even have a navy. And then this happened. Hello, yes, it is I, the King of England, and I just don't make a land empire in India, okay? That'd be very— Oh, but your majesty, I want the money. Oh, there's so much money there. Oh. And so the British East India Company started their land empire. During the 7 Years' War, they went to the French allied state of Bengal and brutally annexed it, effectively kicking out France from India, which allowed the British to take over the entire subcontinent. Fun fact, I'm from Bengal. Yay! This was all without the British Empire's approval, and they even requested the British East India Company to stop, but they didn't, cause there's so much money. The way they actually got the entirety of India was through bribing Indian state rulers, and as well as pinning Indian state rulers against each other. They even had an army of 250,000 paid Indian soldiers called sepoys, which will come into play later on. Let's discuss some of the treatment the native population had while the British were present. Now, the British enforced taxes on the Indians and changed what crops they harvested from food essentials that they really needed to what the British wanted, like cotton and tea. Sepoys saw mass discrimination from the British officers. Things like religious discrimination, pay cuts, no promotions, and just overall racism and not listening to whatever they say were haunting their daily lives. It was time for a rebellion. With all of these factors in mind, one sepoy garrison decided to revolt in 1857. This revolt catapulted revolutions all around North India to attempt to get the British out of there, but the British fought back hard, and more than 100,000 Indians died. After seeing this, Queen Victoria thought that the British East India Company sucked at doing their job, so they dissolved the company and now India is directly controlled by the British Crown, and they instituted the British Raj. While the British Raj improved some things for Indians with some recognition of princely states before the takeover and an Indian civil service, the British Raj was really just an extension of wealth collecting and racism that had been already going on with the British East India Company. In 1885, a group called the Indian National Congress tried to give Indians a greater voice in their government, but Britain said no. Then the World Wars happened. The British Raj completely supported the Entente in World War I, with soldiers and supplies. The Indians found this super hypocritical, as the British were fighting for democracy in these wars, while India, who they controlled, got none of that. During World War II, India supplied the British with 2.5 million soldiers and loaned 100 million sterling to them, while providing a lot of their supplies. This would have absolutely devastating impacts on the Indians. To deter the Japanese from trying to take over eastern India, the British went on a scorched earth policy in Bengal. This caused 3 million Bengalis to die from the resulting famine.
After World War II, British costs of maintaining the British Raj and the work of freedom fighters like Mahatma Gandhi and Jawaharlal Nehru allowed India to gain independence on August 15, 1947. When the British decolonized, they hastily drew the borders of India and Pakistan based upon religious majorities. The new border, called the Radcliffe Line, was a disaster. As Hindus and Muslims traveled to their respective countries, tensions erupted in Bengal and Punjab. Mass violence took place where Hindus and Muslims were persecuted by each other. One example is the Lahore Sialkot massacre. In September 1947, a train traveling from Lahore to Sialkot in modern-day Pakistan was attacked by mobs. The attackers targeted passengers based on religious identity. Many passengers were killed and the train was set on fire. During this time, many more massacres would occur with trains arriving at stations full of dead bodies. This violent event became known as the partition, directly caused by drawing terrible borders for the new countries. After the 7 Years' War, the British got full control over India. With the institution of the British Raj in 1858, the British worked to consolidate their control in India. The British improved infrastructure like bridges and buildings and removed the practices of sati. They established schools, but the education they provided were mostly closed off to the Indian people. The British entry into the Indian economy nearly destroyed Indian industry. They used India as a supply for raw goods like cotton the British economy needed. Thus, the Indian economy became heavily reliant on the British. An emphasis on cash crops set by the British reduced the amount of food available, causing famines. The persecutions and the partition would contribute to the hostility between the two new nations. This and border issues that remained from the Radcliffe Line were major factors in the First Indo-Pakistani War, the Kashmir War. The War of 1965 was caused by India and Pakistan tensions over border disputes in Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistani forces invaded and India retaliated. It was the largest engagement of armored vehicles and tanks since World War II. After 17 days of heavy fighting, a ceasefire was soon called, ending the war. The War of 1971 was caused by West Pakistan trying to assert more control over East Pakistan in Operation Searchlight. They violently suppressed Bengal nationals, with thousands of people killed and raped. This prompted a storm of refugees to enter India. India decided helping the Bengals would be easier than accepting all the refugees. For aiding the Bengals, Pakistan made a preemptive strike on the Indian Air Force. India retaliated, and this began the largest war between India and Pakistan since the partition. Did you know that Richard Nixon supported Pakistan in this war? He saw India as an enemy due to the Indo-Soviet Friendship Treaty. The United States, supposedly the defenders of peace and democracy, supported the leaders committing the genocide. What a bunch of hypocrites. These tensions still remain between India and Pakistan to this day. Even China has entered the fray into the highly disputed area of Jammu and Kashmir. The tensions inspire nationalists, but at the end of the day, the people who suffer the most are the people who live there.
सच लगता है झूठ जैसा है ये तेरी आंखों का करम दृश्य जो ये देखती है सच है वो या है सच होने का भरम दृश्य